Welcome back to the Toledo Rockets podcast. I'm your host, Brian Nowicki. Today, we're going to talk about the men's basketball team, looking at the non-conference schedule so far, and then do a preview of the conference, a little bit of the conference schedule and what we expect to see this year with different conference opponents and where Toledo could end up. So let's first of all look back at last season. The men's basketball team went 26-8 with a 17-3 conference record on their way to a MAC regular season title and the number one seed in the MAC tournament. Unfortunately, the Rockets lost to the Akron Zips in the MAC tournament semifinals, and it's the second straight year that Toledo has won the MAC regular season title, but then lost in the MAC tournament and therefore did not get a bid into the NCAA tournament. So they had to settle for NIT tournament both years. And, that's something obviously Rocket fans would like to see Toledo get into the NCAA tournament. It's been a long, long time since that last happened. And, you look at it, winning the back-to-back regular season MAC titles is the first time in program history. So there's really good things happening there. But not getting in the NCAA tournament has been a big sticking point for a lot of Rocket fans recently. They went 13-2 at home last year, which is a really good thing. And of course, one of those home games was the game against Dayton in the NIT that the Rockets lost. The other home game was a regular season loss to Kent State. So Todd Kowalczyk is in his 13th season as the head coach of Toledo. And, you look at it, he's had a really good career here at Toledo, but has not been able to get into the NCAA tournament. And that's something that, like I said, it's a sticking point with a lot of Rocket fans. And the question is, when is it going to happen? Can it happen this year? It certainly can. And we're going to look at some things here and see if we can kind of plan out who's going to be maybe the tougher competition in conference for Toledo and see what we get there. But Kowalczyk has to find a way to win the MAC tournament and get into the NCAA tournament. That's something that Rocket fans really need to see from this basketball team. So when you look, Kowalczyk has 238 career wins at Toledo and 374 total wins in his coaching career. Again, he's done a great job before Toledo. He was at Wisconsin Green Bay, and he did a great job there. But until Toledo gets to the NCAA tournament, that's what people are going to remember. So he can really up his legacy at Toledo if he can get the team into, over the hump and into the NCAA tournament. Looking again at last year, a key player that has to be replaced this year from last year's team is Ryan Rollins. He averaged 18.9 points per game for the Rockets as a sophomore last year. He elected to make himself eligible for the NBA draft, which, it did kind of surprise me a little bit. I thought he was going to go another year before he started looking at that, but he did get drafted in the second round by the Golden State Warriors. And, Toledo had to move on, and he was a big part of the team, no doubt about it. And you could see on the court last year when he was in the game, even if he wasn't scoring points, he just made the team look better out there. And you go to this year and it's still early in the year, so it's hard to say, especially as we get into conference play. But so far, the Rockets have done well without him on the court this year. And, we're going to explain a little bit maybe as we go down here at some of the players that have stepped up and so forth. But before that, let me just kind of give a little more of a recap of what's happened so far this season, since we haven't talked a whole lot about the men's team so far. They're 7-3 overall and 4-0 at home. Remember, I said they went 13-2 at home last year. They're 4-0 this year. So they've been really, really good in Savage Arena. They've been a little maybe iffy at times out there, right? There have been times when you kind of wonder if it's going to be one of those games that you should have won and you just don't win. And then there's some of those games uh, where you look at it, you're like, boy, as bad as we played, we were able to come out with a victory. And, the victory over Canisius was an example of that just over the weekend. On Saturday, a 1 point victory. It was one of those games where Toledo played pretty poorly and probably should have lost that game, but still was able to win the game. But then you've got other games where, they just played great. And, one of the best examples, I think, is UAB. UAB coming into this season was a Conference USA favorite, and Toledo won that game 93-85. Um, Richmond is another team that was a team that Toledo played at Richmond last year and had a great first half. And then the second half of that game, Toledo kind of fell apart and Richmond came back and won the game. Well, this year, Toledo avenged that loss with a victory in Savage Arena. Final score was 90-67 and displayed a complete game, from the start to the finish. It was a great game for Toledo. So you look at the remaining non-conference schedule. They play at Marshall on December 17th, so that's a few days away here. And then at Vermont, and then they have a home game in Savage Arena against Lourdes University to finish off non-conference play. The first conference game will be against Ball State at Savage Arena on January 3rd of 2023, so that'll get the conference season going. So you look right now, the Rockets 7-3, 3 more games to go. Definitely all 3 are winnable. Could potentially be 10-3 going into conference play. And so now I talked a little bit about Ryan Rollins and replacing him this year and how the team's done pretty well. And let's go in and look at some of the players and see exactly why that's been. And first of all, senior JT Shoemate, he leads the team with 19.4 points per game. He's been great for Toledo, no doubt about it. He's a guy that he was good last year too, but he can really lead this team and pull this team to a victory if he needs to. Junior Raji Dennis is second on the team with 18 points per game. And, he's a guy that came in last year, played really well as well. He played great against Canisius over the weekend, I think, and was one of the main reasons for the victory. And he's right up there, 18 points per game. So you got 2 guys up there playing very well. Yeah, you looked at last year, Ryan Rollins led the team with 18.9 points per game. Second, I think, was like around maybe 15, 16 points per game. I don't have the number with me right now. But so he clearly led the team. You got 2 guys up there, 19.4 and 18 points per game. And it's not just them, right? You look at senior Cedric Milner, he's averaging 15 points per game. And then you got sophomore Dante Maddox Jr. averaging 10.3 points per game. And then junior Tyler Cochran is just below double digits at 9 points per game. So you have a pretty good balance out there, right? And we've talked about this with the women's team too. There's several players that tend to, lead the team in scoring, right, with double figures and so forth. It's not unusual to have 4 or 5 players in double figures in a game, and you're seeing that with the men's team this year too, which is better. There's a little bit better depth, I think, this year on the team than there was last year, and should help the team as they move through conference play. Overall, the Rockets are averaging 84.9 points per game and giving up an average of 78.3 points per game. So, going to look at a couple of players here a little closer that are new coming into Toledo here this year, right? Tyler Cochran, he's been around the MAC for a while now. This is his first season at Toledo, but he did play 2 years at Northern Illinois before then transferring to Ball State for the 2021-22 season. And he was second on the Ball State Cardinals team with 11.9 points per game last season. And he transferred over to Toledo now this year. And, he went from 11.9 points per game to just below that 9 points per game, but he's playing on a better team that has better depth than what Ball State had last year. So um, he's playing pretty well, and I think he's a player that has good experience that's going to help in not just conference play, but down the stretch going into the MAC tournament. And then another player we want to look at is sophomore Dante Maddox Jr. He's another transfer that's in his first season at Toledo. He previously played at Cal State Fullerton, averaging 6.8 points per game last season. So he stepped up a bit, averaging 10.3 points per game so far this year for the Rockets. And both of these guys, Maddox and Cochran, they're going to provide quality minutes on this team, no doubt about it. I mean, it's huge to have, I think, the kind of depth that they've got now, that they can look at 4 or 5 guys that have the potential to hit double figures any game, right? Pretty much every game. That's just great for the team. If you've got 1 or 2 players that aren't playing as well, gives you a chance to really still come out and get the victory, especially when you're playing against good teams. So JT Shoemate, talked about him a little bit already. He's been great this year. He 18.9 points per game. No, I'm sorry, 19.4 points per game. Definitely leading the team, improved his average from last year. And, last year he was a second team all MAC. Seems like a bit of a snub that maybe he should have been first team all MAC, but he was second team all MAC. He was also named to the COSIDA first team all academic all American squad. He was a MAC best 48.2% from 3-point range, and he scored 15 points per game. He was second on the team to Ryan Rollins. And he also led the team with 6.1 rebounds per game. So far this year, like I said, he's averaging 19.4 points per game through the 10 games, and just been playing, great basketball. Ray J. Dennis is right behind him. He has a team high 5.9 assists per game. And like I said, he's averaging 18 points per game this year. So both of those guys are, really picking up and playing well for Toledo so far this year. And I expect them to continue to do well as we go into conference play. All right. And before we move on, if you like the content that we've had here on the show, please hit the subscribe button below and give a like to this episode. And also, comment in the comments in the bottom about whatever it is that you like about the men's basketball team, or if there's any other topics that you want us to have, whether it's men's basketball team related, women's basketball team, football, whatever. Give your suggestions, and if you have questions, we'll look to get those answered as well. All right, so we're going to start looking a little bit more at some of the teams that could contend with Toledo going for a 3rd straight regular season MAC title and a chance to finally get over the hump and win the MAC tournament championship. To get over that hump and win the MAC tournament and a berth into the NCAA tournament, probably have to get past a pretty familiar foe, right? And the Rockets lost to Akron 80-72 in the MAC tournament semifinals last year, and then they lost to Ohio University 87-80 in the MAC tournament semifinals 2 years ago. Both of those teams could be contenders again, but I think perhaps the biggest challenger is going to be Kent State. And this is why I say it. Kent State is 7-3 so far this season. Pretty good record, but let's look a little closer here. They had a close loss, 49-44 to number 2 Houston. And then another close loss at number 18 Gonzaga. That game was 73-66. Kent State's playing really well. Just a couple of things go different in those 2 games, and they're 9-1 right now. So they are a very good team, and I think they're probably going to be the toughest competition for Toledo this year. Now, there's only one game in conference for Toledo and Kent State, and that's a matchup on January 10th at Kent State. While it is the only game during the regular season, I think they could meet again in the MAC tournament. And, anything can happen, but we could see them both number one and number two seeds and potentially a matchup in the championship game, which could be a great game, really. Um, you know, Kent State just playing great so far this year. I mentioned Akron and Ohio. We know that they have played well in the past couple of years. Ohio has not had a good start this year. Akron's been okay. I expect they'll probably be really good. You got Bowling Green, of course. Toledo will play them a couple of times in conference. It's a rival, and I think that could be, those could be some interesting games. But Kent State is probably going to be the team to watch out for. And another team that I didn't even mention yet that would be Buffalo, that Toledo has some bit of a history of playing in the last few years. Buffalo's been really good, and there's been some close games. So that's another team that could really challenge. Uh, I think if I really have to look at it, I don't think Toledo is going to win the MAC regular season title this year. I think, in all honesty, we're probably looking at Kent State. If they continue the way they've been playing, they've got some really good players on that team. I think they're going to probably be the number one seed. But we know from the last 2 years, the number one seed that going into the tournament, the MAC tournament, doesn't mean anything because Toledo has lost out both years, and both years in the semifinals. So they didn't even get to the championship game at that point. So I think Toledo's probably looking at around a number two, number three seed going into the tournament if things play out the way I think they're going to. And that's still a good position to make it all the way to the championship game. And if they can win that game, then they get the automatic bid into the NCAA tournament. And, Todd Kowalczyk, like I said, he's done a great job at Toledo. And really, to build his legacy, he needs to get over the hump and get the team into the NCAA tournament. That's what the team wants. That's what Rocket fans want, and this is one of the best chances. I think the last couple of years have been good chances, but this is one of the best chances as well with this team. We got a couple of seniors here that some guys that have been playing for a few years here in Toledo, some guys like Cochran, who has good experience in the MAC playing at Northern Illinois and Ball State first year at Toledo, but he's got some good experience coming in. And just, a lot of experience on this team, a lot back from last year outside of, losing Ryan Rowlands. So this really should be a good year. And, hopefully it will be the team that is able to get over the hump and get into the NCAA tournament. So let me know what you think in the comments. And thank you for watching today.